Just a heads up. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Jasodhanandana Vraja Janaranjana Jamunatira Manachari Nachari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Shutarashutashi Srimad Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Rajagranta Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the Assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Agyantamirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyarevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 12, Text 13. Yatrottama shloka gunanuvada prastu yate gramya kata vighata Nishevyamano nudinam mamukshor Mitim sitim yachati vasudeve Yatrottama shloka gunanuvada Prastu yate gramya kata vighata Nishevyamano nudinam mamukshor Matim sitim yachati vasudeve Jantama shloka Gunanuvada. Tamashloka Gunanavada Kristu Yate Gramya Kata Vigataha Nishevyamano Nudinama Mukshor Matim Satim Yachchati Vasudeve. Mothers, Netrotamashloka Gunanavada Prastu Yate Gramya Kata Vigata Nishevyamano Nudinama Mukshor Natim Satim Yashati Vasudeve. Okay. Word to word meaning. Yatra, in which place, in the presence of exalted devotees. Uttama Shloka Guna Anuvada, discussion of the pastimes and glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prastuyate is presented. Gramya Kata Vighata, due to which there is no chance of talking of worldly matters. Nishevyamana, being heard very seriously. Anudinam, day after day. Mumuksho, of persons who are very serious about getting out of material entanglement. Mentim, meditation. Sitim, pure and simple. Yachchati is turned. Vasudeva, unto the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. Who are the pure devotees mentioned here? In the previous verse it was mentioning how unless one has bathed himself in the dust of the lotus feet of pure devotees, then they will not be able to understand or attain Krishna. One cannot attain Krishna by austerity, by brahmacharya, by strict study of the Vedas, by following the rules and regulations of householder existence. But only by bathing oneself in the dust of the lotus feet of pure devotees can Krishna actually be obtained. So then this verse is saying, who are those pure devotees? That question naturally comes up because the tendency of the conditioned soul is not to believe no one can be pure. Okay, Srila Prabhupada, of course, is pure, but after that, that is a tendency. So the Bhagavatam is trying to help us identify what is the characteristic or symptom of a pure devotee of the Lord, by which one can hope to recognize them. We might get back to that. So who are the pure devotees mentioned here? In an assembly of pure devotees, there is no question of discussing material subjects like politics and sociology. In an assembly of pure devotees, there is discussion only of the qualities, forms, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He is praised and worshipped with full attention in the association of pure devotees by constantly hearing such topics respectfully. Even a person who wants to merge into the existence of the Absolute Truth abandons this idea and gradually becomes attached to the service of Vasudeva. Purport: the symptoms of pure devotees are described in this verse. The pure devotee is never interested in material topics. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has strictly prohibited his devotees to talk about worldly matters. Gramya Varta na kahibe. This is an instruction to Raghunath Das Goswami. One should not indulge in talking unnecessarily about news of the material world. One should not waste time in this way. This is a very important feature in the life of a devotee. A devotee has no other ambition than to serve Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This Krishna consciousness movement was started to engage people 24 hours daily in the service of the Lord and in His glorification. The students in this institution engage in the cultivation of Krishna consciousness from 5 in the morning to 10 at night. Theoretically. They actually have no opportunity to waste their time unnecessarily by discussing politics, sociology, and current events. These will go their own way. A devotee is concerned only with serving Krishna positively and seriously. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So there's a saying that the truth will set you free. This is a popular cliche in the material world. So this chapter is trying to ascertain what is actually the truth. So Jadabharata spends so much time explaining, so many verses explaining that this conventional existence is not actually the truth. You know, someone's fat, skinny, someone's lifting some heavy load and feeling tired, and this appears to be truth. Sometimes we criticize others and say, I'm just telling the truth. And we have this tendency as conditioned souls. So Jadabharata was trying to explain here that actually what we know to be truth in this material world, the conventional understanding, is not actually the truth. Just like sometimes someone may ask us, who are you? And we may give an answer, I am a spirit soul, fell from Vaikuntha. We may give some answer like this. And that's a true answer, in fact. But then we say, no, speak practically, speak conventionally. So my name is such and such. But that is not actually the truth. So to be absorbed in the conventional understanding of existence and think oneself to be truthful is not actually true. That's what Jadabharata is trying to explain. Although it appears to be the case, especially when we get into criticizing and praising others, we generally tend to do that based on the material identification. And that is not actually the truth. There's an instruction in the Bhagavatam that comes, para swabhava karmani. I can't remember the Sanskrit right now, because the last line is asatya biniveshata. Anyway, very nice verses there. That one should not praise or criticize the enjoying souls in this material world. One should not praise or criticize them. We like the first part very much. I definitely won't praise them. But the criticizing, and then the instruction comes, well, why not? And the Bhagavatam says, because by doing so, one becomes quickly deviated from his real self-interest. Ashubhrishate swarta. Ashubhrishate swararta. Swararta means your highest self-interest. Ashu means very quickly. Bhrishate means turned away from your highest self-interest. How so? Asatya biniveshata. By becoming absorbed in the temporary. Because the conditioned souls, when we criticize them, we're criticizing their material body and their conditioned mind, which is not actually their true self. So by getting absorbed in that praise and criticism, which has nothing to do with the true self, we actually get absorbed in Maya. And that way we take birth in Maya. So, but this is a conventional understanding. That's what appears to be the truth for us, although it's only a shadow of the real substance. It appears very real. It's just like when you're dreaming. When you're dreaming, the dreams feel very real. Have you ever had a dream where you're like drowning or something like that, or flying, or maybe you're God? some type of dream like that, and it feels very real. Or you have some nightmare. Even when you wake up from the nightmare may still cause a little tremor, even though you're in your waking life. Isn't it? You have experience like this, right? Although the dream is not real, we identify it with so intimately that we think it to be very real, and we think that to be the truth, actually. These things are truly happening. So that's the sleeping state, and this is the waking state, but both are dreams only. Prabhupada said one is a night dream and one is a daydream only. So the daydream, of course, is more convincing because it's kind of like more continual. The continuity of the daydream is more long-standing, so it seems more substantial, but it's not actually true. It's not substantial. Although the energy is itself true, the forms created by the energy are not true. We've given this example before. This is the analogy given in the Bhagavatam. It's just like if you take, putty or modeling clay, and you make various forms of the clay. Suppose you make a house out of the clay. You're going to live in that house? Suppose you make a house out of clay. You will live in that house? No, because it is not a real house, actually. Or suppose you make a tiger out of the clay. Then you feel very much afraid of that tiger? Maybe if the lights are turned off. But otherwise, you don't feel very much afraid. The clay is real, but the form created by the clay is insubstantial. Right? The house is insubstantial. The tiger is insubstantial. Although the clay is real. So similarly, the Maya Shakti is a real potency of Krishna. It's not that it doesn't exist. It does exist. But the forms created by the Maya Shakti are insubstantial or temporary. And so all these forms that we see in the material world, they're actually insubstantial. So if you take them very seriously and thus deviate your consciousness from Krishna, you become lost in Maya. So that's what Jadabharta has explained these things thus far. So then the question, well, what is the truth? Because the truth will set you free, right? What we know to be true, the conventional understanding of existence is not actually true. That actually binds you and causes your existence with material nature to become more and more intimate. So what is the truth? Because the actual truth will set you free. So what was the actual truth? That was mentioned 2 verses ago. What is the truth? That was mentioned 2 verses ago. Jnana Vishuddham, the verse that come up. You remember? It's a simple answer. You can probably guess it. What is the actual truth? Scared. Everyone's scared to say the wrong answer, huh? Krishna. Param Satyam Dhimahi. The first verse of the Bhagavatam says, the Param Satyam, the absolute truth that for which we meditate upon. We should be meditating upon the absolute truth, or we should be meditating upon truth, not about the faults of devotees and the faults of the conditioned souls and the faults of the material nature and so on. That type of meditation binds you, but the meditation on Krishna liberates you. Param Satyam Dhimahi. That is the actual truth. That truth which is beyond the influence of the modes of material nature. It's beyond the influence of the Maya Shakti. That is actually true. That truth is Krishna. And he has so many features, but his ultimate feature is personal. So we heard that glorification. So how can you know that Krishna? How can that truth actually be realized? We've heard about it, but how can you realize that truth? That question comes up. How can you realize that truth? Only one way to realize that truth. What is that? By bhakti. There's no other way to realize the truth. Only by bhakti you can realize Krishna. Bhaktiyaham ekaya grahya shadayatma priyasatam. Only by exclusive bhakti to Krishna. Shadayatma means with surrender. Shraddha means sharanagati. Those two words are actually synonymous. The symptom of faith is surrender. If one is not surrendered, that is an indication of his lack of faith, actually. Shadayatma priyasatam. Only by pure devotion to Krishna, which is done with full surrender, bhakti manishta, which is fixed on Krishna as the goal of life, with pure devotion, then you can know Krishna. Shrapakam apisambhavat. Even if you have the fault of a low birth. Haribo. There's hope for many of us. Even if there's a fault of a low birth, Shrapakam means a dog eater. Apisambhavat, or the dosha, or the fault of a low birth, even if that is there, if one is having exclusive devotion to Krishna, bhakti ekaya, grahya, with full surrender, accepting Krishna only as the goal of life, man nishta, no other goal to pursue, then you can attain Krishna. Bhakti yamama bijananti yavanyash tasmi tatutta. So many verses like this. Only by bhakti you can get Krishna, otherwise you cannot get Krishna. A very simple point. So how do you get bhakti then? Then that question comes up. Nowadays they have this, what do they call it? The bhakti yoga, bhakti fest. You heard of this thing? Bhakti fest? Sometimes our devotees are going there for preaching also. That's okay. But there's, the prasadam booths. That is the only hope for the people there. Unfortunately. They say bhakti fest, but they're really into Maya and sense gratification, doing all sorts of illicit activities. And they call it an expression of bhakti. But there's a fundamental truth about bhakti. Bhakti is the part of the Swarup Shakti of Krishna. It's part of the internal potency. So that means it's not available in this material world. That's the first thing you should understand. Bhakti actually is not available in this material world. No one can just all of a sudden say, my bhakti. Actually, bhakti has to come to you as a gift. Therefore, we say love of Godhead, right? Why don't we say love for Godhead? Why do we say love of Godhead? That's a very weird language. And we thought maybe Prabhupada's English is, he's, hard time getting the translation together. There's a reason we say love of Godhead, because the love for God is actually an energy of God. It's His Swarup Shakti. So it's of Him. And so in order to actually love God, He has to bestow that Swarup Shakti upon us. And then it reflects back towards Him. The nature of love of Godhead, prema, is that it takes one living entity as a shelter and another living entity as the object of affection. So when one actually gets love of Godhead, real love, which is part of the Swarup Shakti, it's not available in this material world. Then it takes shelter of one living entity. And he's called as the Ashraya Vigraha. Understand? Ashraya Vigraha. Ashraya means shelter. So Bhakti takes shelter of one living entity. He's called as Ashraya Vigraha. And it takes another living entity as the object. There's only one living entity. Krishna. He's called as the Vishaya Vigraha. He's the object of affection. So when one has real bhakti, which is part of the internal potency of Krishna, then that bhakti takes only Krishna as the shelter. It takes no other shelter. That is the nature of bhakti. There's a verse like that also. I'm not able to think of it right now. That when one is actually having bhakti, there's three things that manifest. Just like when you're eating food. Three things happen when you eat food, right? You feel nourished by eating. You feel blissful, satisfied by eating, especially when it's nice preparations. And then after some time, you feel detached from the eating process itself also, isn't it? Because you can only eat so much, stomach only has so much capacity. In the same way, prapadyama nashyata shamashu, this verse, I haven't quoted this verse for a long time, so it's leaving my mind right now. It's for one who's on the process, prapadyama nasya means engaging in bhakti and making progress in bhakti, then three things are also manifest. First thing is there's a bhakti parishanubhavo viraktir, anyatra chaisha chika ekakala. I can't in my mind now. First symptom is bhakti. You have devotion for the Lord. And parisha anubhava means you see Krishna. And those are a little bit lofty. So where's a practical indication that devotion is there? Virakti. Prabhupada used to like to quote this verse. Virakti, it causes detachment from matter completely. When Lord Chaitanya went to Gaya, and after meeting his spiritual master, he got bhakti. That's going to be significant in today's purport, the point that's coming up. He got bhakti after meeting Ishwar Puri. There's a very beautiful section in Chaitanya Bhagavatam. If I had known I was going to give class, maybe I could have brought the verse, we could sing them. They're very nice verses. He met Ishwar Puri, and after that he got bhakti. That is significant. Take a note of that. Mahaprabhu, before he met Ishwar Puri, he was exhibiting his scholarly lila, where he was very puffed up. All the Vaishnavas were very agitated with him, because no one could defeat him. Obviously, he's God. So he would argue with the Vaishnavas, and then he would defeat them. Then he would defeat his point. Then he would defeat that point that he just defeated like that. And he would be very puffed up about it also. So the Vaishnavas would be so agitated. This person is so arrogant. If he would only become a devotee, how wonderful it would be. And of course, little did they know, by the influence of Yogamaya. So after meeting Ishwara Puri, he gained that bhakti. Of course, to the highest degree, Mahabhava, which is the highest form of devotion to Krishna, as exhibited by Srimati Radharani and her gopis. So when he got that bhakti, when he came back to Navadvip, everyone became very much concerned because they noticed how detached he was from everything. So this is a symptom of pure devotion to Krishna. It causes detachment from matter. So this bhakti fest is a little bit misleading. The word is misleading. Real devotion takes only Krishna as the object. So how do you get that devotion then? That real devotion. Not devotion that they're offering at Bhakti Fest, but the real devotion. How do we get that devotion? So that is mentioned yesterday's verse. Only by association with pure devotees you can get that bhakti. So this material world is not true. That's the first point. Second point is Krishna is true. In order to understand that Krishna, you need bhakti. And where can you get that bhakti? Where can you purchase it? It's not available in this material world. You can get it only from pure devotees of Krishna. That is the only way bhakti can actually be obtained. There is no other way of obtaining pure devotion. Krishna bhakti janma mula haya sadhu sangha. Only by sadhu sangha. Krishna bhakti janma mula means the root cause of devotion in this world is sadhu sangha. Only by sadhu sangha one can get that devotion. So who's the sadhu? Then that question comes up. So many questions. Once you uncover one layer of reality, then so many other questions come up. That's why life is meant for inquiry. Jivasya tattva jignasa. Generally, we have a lot of questions about the body and mind. And that will keep us in the material world because that absorption is actually absorption in Maya. We need to have sufficient information how to keep the body and mind peaceful enough for engagement in sadhana. But a lot of inquiry about that means your mind is actually absorbed in the temporary. And then, as a result, you remain in the material world. But the human form of life is actually meant for tattva jignasa. There are so many tattvas to understand in the Krishna consciousness movement, which are very subtle and not very easy to ascertain. Guru tattva, that's a really hard one. Nam tattva, jiva tattva, that's a controversial one that comes up. Rasa tattva, bhakti tattva, bhava tattva. So many tattvas are there. It's like unlimited list. So you can go on sadhana tattva. And if you want your chanting to be pure, you have to understand these tattvas also. This is mentioned. The difference between pure chanting of the holy name of Krishna and impure chanting of the holy name of Krishna is the presence of anarthas to a large degree or less degree. I should say like this. When one is chanting Namabhas, that means that there are still 4 categories of anarthas that is contaminating the consciousness of the living entity. One category is called weakness of heart, hridaya durbayam. Another category is called a thirst for the temporary. We know about that one very well. We know about all these categories, in fact. Another one is called aparad. We know about that one very well, too. And another one is called tattva brahma, which means illusion about tattva. So interestingly enough, in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's Bhajana Rahasya, he basically mentions by following nectar of instruction, those verses of nectar of instruction, you can overcome the weakness of heart, the thirst for the temporary, and aparad, just by strictly following the principles of the nectar of instruction. That's amazing. That's amazing when you think of that small, simple book. But that potency can help us, the instructions in that literature has a potency to help us overcome 3/4 of the anarthas. But there's one category that's very difficult to overcome that's called tattva brahma, which means illusion about spiritual truth. And it has its divisions also. I'm not going to get into those details. So how do you get out of that tattva brahma? Then you have to hear from pure devotees. That is the only way you can get out. Otherwise, then you can never chant purely. And without chanting purely, you can't get the goal of life, which is Krishna prema. Of course, if we chant the semblance of the name, you can get liberation. Haribo! All the way up into Vaikuntha, the 4 types of Vaikuntha liberation. That can be bestowed upon one who's chanting Namabhas. But of course, that's not the goal of our Sampradaya. The goal of our Sampradaya is Krishna prema, is love for Krishna. And that can only be gotten by chanting Shuddhanam, the pure holy name of Krishna. So in order to chant that Shuddhanam, you need to understand its philosophy. And you cannot understand the philosophy unless you're inquisitive about the tattva jignasa. Unless you're inquisitive about it, how you will understand it? Many times, there's a tendency to come to spiritual discussions seeking only inspiration, but not edification. That tendency is very strong, especially if the speaker is charismatic, and he's funny, and there are many stories are there, and you feel inspired. That is, of course, an essential element for carrying on in this Christian consciousness movement. If you don't feel any inspiration, then you'll be hard-pressed to make it. But that is only one aspect of it. Another aspect is you have to be edified. You have to actually understand what's these spiritual truths. That is very important. So the class should not just be entertaining, but it should be edifying as well. But unless our approach to the hearing process is an inquisitive approach, tattva jignasa, then you cannot understand these truths. You will have no questions. So many subtle things are being discussed, and we just take it for granted that I've understood it without asking anything. You don't have to ask necessarily every class per se, but it means the approach to the process is an investigative one. I really want to understand deeply what are all these truths about, so I can chant purely, crying out to Krishna for pure love of God. So like this, tattva jignasa is required. And in that way you can understand these topics and get bhakti. So by the association of pure devotees, sadhu sangha, you can get that. So who are these sadhus? This quality is mentioned here. The sadhu is shloka guna anuvada. They only talk about Krishna. This is sadhu. 24 hours a day, nothing else coming from the mouth but Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Just like in the Gundicha Marjana pastime, when they were cleaning the temple, then in order to indicate what they needed, I need a bucket of water, Krishna, Krishna. Throw the water right here, Prabhu, Krishna, Krishna. That's how they were communicating. No one was saying anything else but Krishna, Krishna. If we tried that out, we might have a little bit of difficulty. We have to deal a little bit on a conventional platform. Dear Prabhu, like that, we may have to come. But they were communicating like that. Krishna, 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 Krishna. And then they would automatically understand what was required. This is completely incredible. Krishna, Krishna, sit down, Krishna, Krishna, or whatever. They were able to understand everything just by that. This is sadhu, only Krishna coming out of the mouth, nothing else. That means his mind and heart must be filled with Krishna. Therefore, generally, it's a good idea not to speak. It is mentioned in this way, because we indicate exactly what's going on in the mind and the heart. And if we're not actually sadhu, so many other rascal things are going on in the mind and the heart, it comes out in our speech. Even if we don't want to, even when we try to cloak ourselves, like Duryodhana. Duryodhana tried to hide the great fear that he was feeling in the first chapter, seeing the arrangement made by Drishtadyumna. But just by speaking, Bhishma and Dronacharya can easily make out, this guy is so afraid and he's not admitting. That's because speech is very revealing. Therefore, it's a good idea to be quiet a lot of times. Of course, we have to speak. But who is a sadhu? He's one who only speaks Krishna. Nothing else. The name of Krishna, the rupa of Krishna, the qualities of Krishna, the pastimes of Krishna, they're like effervescently pouring out of his being. This word effervescently, it's like soda bottle. When you turn it, then all the bubbles come out and they pour out of the bottle. So that there's a word for that is effervescent when that happens. So a devotee is so giddy to speak about Krishna. Giddy is actually a dictionary word. It's not just a Ebonics word. I saw it the other day. So the devotee is so giddy that the glories of Krishna, and of course that includes the devotees of Krishna who are constituents of the absolute truth. They're not indifferent from Krishna. They're effervescently pouring out of the devotee's being, And when you meet such a devotee, you become astonished, actually. You actually become astonished. I met such a devotee in the manner. His name was Ananta Gopal. The glories of devotees constantly coming out of his mouth. It was really astonishing. I was really astonished. Whenever I was asking him about devotees, he would just go on for 5-10 minutes about the glories of that devotee. Then I would ask about another devotee, he would go 5-10 minutes about that devotee's glories. And I was really usually you can't think so clearly about the glories of other devotees. And then it was so much the case that I joked with him one morning that his phone beeped, indicating a text message or something had come up. And I asked him if that was a reminder of some glories of devotee, And then he started laughing. I said, Prabhu, it's not like that. My mind is really contaminated. And then right when he was saying that, another devotee walked into the room and he started glorifying that devotee. And my mind was blown. I was like, this is incredible. Even if I tried to imitate that, I couldn't. unfortunately. My point is that the glories of Krishna and the devotees of Krishna effervescently pour out of the devotee's being. That is mentioned here. Shloka guna anubada. They can't help themselves. And they cannot, just like we can't help speaking about Maya, we try to speak about Krishna. Just like when neophytes, we come together, the first 2 minutes will be about Krishna, and somehow or other just like shoots to some materialistic topic. You might start talking about Krishna, and then you give an example of something you remember from CNN, and then that turns the whole discussion, south, like that. But a devotee of the Lord, sadhu, is the other way around. You come into the sadhu speaking some Maya, and then he turns it into Krishna consciousness. So much so that after the discussion, you become bewildered. What happened? I came to him with a serious problem, and he just started talking about Krishna. And you got bewildered, and then you also got into it. That's the nature of Krishna Katha. When one gets a real taste for Krishna Katha is very dangerous because it steals away all the time. So if you have a lot of important things to do, avoid Krishna Katha. That's a joke, partially, but partially not. I remember being in New York, and Satyaraj Prabhu, I was just supposed to leave the building to go help Adi Purusha Prabhu do some prasadam distribution. And Satyaraj Prabhu had come that time. So he said, let's have some Krishna Katha for 5 minutes. I said, Prabhu, I have to go. Then he said, no, just 5 minutes we will talk. I said, Prabhu, I know what happens. It starts off 5 minutes, and then 1 point, because it's actually nectarian. The glories of Krishna is light. It's sweet, like sugar candy, as Rupa Goswami tells us. So the devotee is always eagerly speaking about Krishna, and then that is the swarup quality of a devotee that's being mentioned here. Always glorifying Krishna, and the tatashta lakshana that's being mentioned here is that he avoids gramya katha. Gramya katha vighata. He doesn't speak about nonsense things of the material world, things that he saw in the news. Prabhupada said, Prabhupada's language here, I liked it. One should not indulge in talking unnecessarily about news of the material world. Prabhupada uses the word unnecessarily. So sometimes in order for giving an example to the conditioned souls, a conventional example of the world that they know will be used. But one doesn't get into it. That's not nectarian. One gets into Krishna Katha. That is nectarian. So this is a sadhu. Who is a pure devotee? One who is always speaking about Krishna. He never speaks unnecessarily about nonsense. This is a devotee. Then the second stanza of the line mentions something for us. Nishevyamano anudinama mukshur. We should take very seriously hearing from such persons. Without such persons, we cannot actually know Krishna. Again, the devotee is called as we told earlier, Vigraha. There's a Ashraya Vigraha is called devotee, and the Vishaya Vigraha is Krishna. So the Vishaya Vigraha, especially in the age of Kali, descends in his Shabda avatar. That means his avatar of sound vibration. The holy name of Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita of Krishna, the mantras that you receive at the time of Diksha. These are all Vishaya Vigraha. They're manifestations of Krishna in his Shabda avatar. So the Ashraya Vigraha can reveal the Vishaya Vigraha. Otherwise, you cannot know Krishna. That we've already mentioned. Without the devotee of the Lord, no one can actually know Krishna. So there, the Ashraya Vigraha reveals the Vishaya Vigraha. So in the age of Kali, because the Vishaya Vigraha descends in his Shabda avatar, then the Ashraya Vigraha has to reveal that. Krishna, as it were, this is mentioned in Chaitanya Bhagavat, the tongue of the devotee becomes the womb in which Krishna takes his birth in this age of Kali. That is mentioned. So you can only know Krishna through that. So nishevyamano anundinama mukshur. So one has to take very seriously the process of hearing from devotees who are manifesting Krishna in his Shabda avatar by speaking, by chanting, etc. Nishevyamano anundinam. Anundinam means constantly or daily. For the conditioned souls, conditioned souls it means daily. Because Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says if you say constantly, the conditioned souls might get a doubt if they could follow it or not. So for the sadhakas who are very neophyte, daily. Nityam Bhagavata, Nityam means daily. As we make more advanced, it means constantly. You should hear about the glories of Krishna. Nishevyamano, taking it very seriously. And then if you do that what is the result of taking that hearing very seriously? Hearing is very important. There are so many verses there about hearing. Gyane prayastam udapasya namanta eva. Jivanti samukaritam bhavadiya vartam. Stane sita shrutikatam tanuman nobir. Then, ye prayasho ajita jito paishitaistri lokyam. This is a nice verse. It's mentioned that Gyane prayastam udapasya, you should completely throw out the process of mental speculation. I will figure it out by my tiny brain. That process should be thrown out completely. And you should submit yourself, namanta eva, surrender to the pure devotees who are constantly vibrating Krishna Katha. Mukaritam bhavadiya vartan, the devotees are constantly vibrating, you should surrender to them. Jivanti means you should make that your life. Just like in order to live in this body, you have to eat food, isn't it? Otherwise, you cannot live. So for nishevya mano, for a person who's serious, then they feel they cannot live without the hearing process. That is the food that will nourish them in their Krishna consciousness. That's hard to realize because we have a lot of mundane absorption, but this is a fact. Jivanti means that is their life. That's how they survive. And what is the result? You don't have to worry about changing ashrams. If it is helpful for you, that is fine. But stanesita means that is not an important consideration. But dedicating your mind, your body, your words to such hearing, that is required. Then what is the result? You can conquer Krishna. Although Krishna is ajita means he's unconquerable, he becomes jitta, he becomes conquered by one who hears in that way. That means that through his hearing seriously, he develops prema. Because only by prema you can capture Krishna. Prema is described as Krishna akarshani. It captures Krishna. So that means through that serious hearing, you develop prema, you capture Krishna. And the purport is described that for one class of pure devotees, with their body, minds, and words, they conquer Krishna. That's nice. And another class of pure devotees, they conquer Krishna's body, mind, and words. The prema bhaktas. That's mentioned in the purport. And for the non-devotees, they cannot conquer Krishna with their body, mind, and words. They're simply left with their mental speculations. Aprapyamam nivartante mritu samsara bhatmani. They take repeated birth in this material world. So nishevya manam, there are many verses. My time is running short, so I cannot go. Some verses are coming to mind about the hearing process. But the point is easily ascertained. By hearing seriously, one can become freed from false ego. And that is mentioned here also. Mumukshur matim satim yachati vasudeve. What is the result of taking the hearing process very seriously? Mumukshur. One becomes free from the desire of liberation. This desire of liberation is considered more dangerous than a desire, of course this means a personal liberation. The desire for impersonal liberation is considered more dangerous than sense gratification, bhoga. And you'll find this out in the Nectar Devotion, that this verse comes up, bhukti mukti spriha yavat pishachi hridi vartate, that as long as the heart is hunted by the witch of bhukti and mukti, then how can you experience the happiness of bhakti? So then after that, in the 4th chapter of the Nectar Devotion, it's a series of verses condemning sense gratification, but most of the verses condemn liberation. Because Rupa Goswami considers this to be more deadly a desire than even sense gratification. Because you try to cease to exist. One devotee told me he was struggling very badly, this about 2 years ago. And he was asking why he can't just merge, just cease to exist. And I said, that is a very envious statement. And he said, how is it envious? It's a very genuine statement. He told me like this. So I said, it's envious because what you're actually saying is that I would prefer to cease to exist than to serve Krishna. I prefer to cease to exist and to render service to Krishna eternally. That's a very envious statement. So we had a good laugh about that because that's exactly what's going on. So this mumukshur, when this mumukshur point is mentioned, is representing the epitome of dangerous desires to have in this world. The desire for liberation is the epitome of dangerous desires to have. So anything under that, of course, is very bad. But by hearing from the devotees, the sadhus, seriously, then even this desire can become destroyed. And then what happens? Matim satim yachati vasudeva. One's meditations become filled with Vasudeva. And then by thinking of Lord Vasudeva, you go to Lord Vasudeva, isn't it? At the time of death, if you remember Krishna, then you go to Krishna. So in this way, the sadhus, they provide for us the highest benediction. Prabhupada said this Krishna, many places, repeatedly in his lectures, everywhere. Prabhupada is told that this Krishna consciousness movement is meant to give people the opportunity to hear. That is the purpose of this Krishna consciousness movement. If we have to ask, someone will ask us, what is the purpose of this Krishna consciousness movement? The purpose is to give people the opportunity to hear. Because by that opportunity, they can conquer Krishna. That is, I already quoted that verse. This is a benediction of such a simple process as hearing, that you can conquer Krishna. So we want this whole world to conquer Krishna's heart. The atheists have a very bad approach to conquering Krishna that ends up in repeated birth and death. They just speculate. They try to kill Krishna by writing things that say Krishna doesn't exist. I heard, it's like Nietzsche. I heard like this. I don't know if this is true. I heard like this from a devotee though. That one time Nietzsche wrote on a wall, "God is dead." Something like that. Is that a true thing? I know that's his statement, but I heard that he wrote it on the wall somewhere, "God is dead." And I think someone, anyway, maybe this was a joke, that the priest came and wrote behind that, "Nietzsche is dead." For writing like that, we're going to kill you. Anyway, like this is people, the atheists, they're taking one approach to try to conquer Krishna. They are writing things evil about Krishna, trying to kill his existence through the pen. Because they cannot practically kill Krishna, that's not possible. Just like, who was that demon? Pondrika? Pondrika was his name? He was a demon. He was such a nonsense person that he said, "I am Vishnu." What is this worship of Krishna? I am Vishnu. Why are they worshiping that rascal Krishna? He was saying like this. And then he went to the battle. He had 2 wooden arms attached to his body. He said, "I am Vishnu." What a nonsense person, huh? 2 wooden arms he attached to his body. He said, "I am Vishnu." Why are they worshiping this Krishna? So he came in the battlefield and he said, "Who are you, Krishna? Why are you imitating me? I am actually the Supreme Lord." And when Krishna and the Pandavas saw it, they had a good laugh. They were like, as we would say, rolling on the ground. It was like, what nonsense person this is. And then Pandavas said, "Oh, you are laughing? Then come and face me in my supreme power." And then Krishna just threw his chakra and chopped off his head. And then they laughed some more. What a nonsense guy. The atheists, they take a wrong approach to trying to conquer Krishna. An intelligent person will take this approach to conquer Krishna. What is that approach? You hear from pure devotees of Krishna, then you can conquer Krishna and experience a ever blissful, eternally blissful life in the spiritual world. So this verse is mentioning that. If we want to, the truth will set you free. The truth is Krishna. And it can only be understood by bhakti, and that bhakti is given by a devotee. And if you want to get that bhakti, then you have to hear. To associate with sadhus means to hear from sadhus. And that way you get the supreme benediction of life. That is mentioned here as far as I could make out. So, sorry, again, I wasn't exactly properly prepared, but today went better than last time. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or anything you want to ask? Yeah.
Thank you for class, Prabhu.
Is it on? Yeah. Well, we just take it for granted. Everything we're doing is more or less inspired by, it wasn't on, a false. He said, the question is, what should we be looking for? How do we know we're being influenced by false ego? Well, you can just see, the easiest way to see is, what are you attracted to? A material designation makes you attracted to the material world, and a spiritual designation makes you attracted to the spiritual world. So when we find ourselves attracted, our mind is filled with the qualities of the material existence. particularly the sense objects, particularly certain types of sense objects, the ones that make us weak in the knees and so on. There was sorry, this is mundane, but you have to be careful, you could see the samskaras are there, so when you speak, it sometimes causes them to pop up. There was a song like that, I get so weak in the knees. There was some song like that when we were kids. I remember this song, a mundane song, we're not discussed. But certain objects are there that cause one to become completely bewildered. And the mind is filled with those objects in the mind. You think of those things. During japa, you think of those things. And during reading, you think of those things. Doing book distributions, think of those things. Do kirtan, you think of those things. That means false ego is acting very prominently. You can easily make out what is the mind attracted to. Mind is not attracted to Harina. Mind is not attracted to the types of Krishna. As soon as this begins, immediately we feel, working hard to keep our eyes away, keep our heads on our shoulder. So a false ego is acting. When one is free from false ego, when the body is completely exhausted, as soon as Krishna topics will start, immediately you come to life. Give or take certain examples you may be thinking of. But in principle, immediately your heart becomes so enlivened. So many times you've seen this from senior devotees where they will begin a class that they're very sick or tired, and they're going to give a short discussion on account of that. And as they begin talking, they go on and on and on and on. They become enlivened by that topic. That means the influence of ahankara is absent. When your heart is enlivened by the topics of Krishna, particularly by chanting the name of Krishna, this is the best test, especially during japa. Because during kirtan, the external aspects may be helping you to get a taste. And that is also valid, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. It's not the highest type of ruchi, but it is a valid taste. But if those things were absent, you might find it difficult to participate in the kirtan. So japa is a really good test of how the ahankara is actually influencing us. What is the mind running to when we're chanting japa? So anyway, it is there. What to do? It is not that we should go on moping about it. Oh, yeah, false ego. Take a positive approach. Carry on. Determinedly and with faith and the worship of Krishna. Tato bachite man pito shradalo drita nishchaya. Krishna says one should not become melancholy by this affair. Rather, with determination and faith, continue on with the worship of Krishna. Chanting His holy name, hearing topics in the association of pure devotees. Then it gets better. But it's obvious that ahankara is acting. Isn't it? It is obvious thing. Like that. Isn't it? Acting hard.
Thank you very much for your class. Chanting about the pure holy name. You told that you should know about the pure tattvas. Can you just explain in brief what are the tattvas?
No, there's so many. I said tattva means spiritual truth, like that, simply put. So there's so many. The truth of the Guru tattva, the truth of the holy name, nam tattva, the truth of rasa, the truth of bhakti, the truth of sadhana, the truth of Vaishnavas. There's so many tattvas are there to understand. The truth of the Maya Shakti, or Shakti tattva is also there. So then those things have to be understood. And you would think, why not? Let me just chant Hare Krishna and everything will be okay. That's partially true and it's partially not true. The not truth in it is that our philosophical understanding of existence affects our approach to existence. Everyone has a philosophy, whether they have it articulated or not. Like now, their philosophy generally in the material world is, if it feels good, do it. That's actually a philosophical stance. It's not so philosophical because they're just discussing the process. Do it as a process, and if it feels good, that's the extent of their philosophy. As if everything that feels good is good for you. It's not deeply philosophical, but that's their stance on life. If it feels good, then do it. It's a type of understanding about existence that they have. So whatever type of philosophy you have, knowingly or unknowingly, based on the types of destinations you have accepted for yourself, then that's going to affect your approach to existence. So when we hear the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, our approach to existence becomes different also, doesn't it? Okay, Krishna is all-pervading. He's everywhere. Everything is His property. That affects our approach to the existence. Before, I was thinking everything is an object of my enjoyment. And after hearing the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, I still think that, but I know it's not. I still think everything is the object of my enjoyment, but I know that it's Krishna's property and that it's meant for Krishna's service. So it affects my approach to the existence.
Tattva could be understood by association of devotees. And
By hearing. By
hearing.
the process of
so there is no specific books for tattvas that, okay?
No, Haribo, all the books we were discussing.
That means any specific, like Harinam Chintamani or something like
all
that.
of the books given by Vaishnavacharyas, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Vedas, all these books are describing these spiritual truths. But in order to, although the books describe them, because the books are Vishaya Vigraha, they have to be revealed by the Ashraya Vigraha. So just by reading that won't be sufficient, unfortunately. Unless you're already advanced in Krishna, Nashayami Atmabhava Sto, Gyanandipena Basvata, he decides to bestow upon you revelation out of his own kindness. But generally, the Ashraya Vigraha has to reveal those truths through his speech. Otherwise, you cannot really understand them, or you get a misconception about them. The nice thing about hearing from devotees is that they can make out that you're having a misunderstanding, they can correct it. Whereas with reading the Vishaya Vigraha, you don't experience the same reciprocation. Just like when you worship the deity, you see the deity, you may not experience reciprocation on account of our material vision. Our vision of the deity is mundane. So we cannot understand how the deity's mad with us sometimes, let's say. Just like when, this is described in the 7th chapter of the 1st canto, when, who is that? Ashwatthama had killed the sons of Draupadi, 5 sons of Draupadi. So Krishna was furious, but he looked beautiful with smiling face. Although he was furious, so Prabhupada gives a purport because Krishna is transcendental. So the deity can actually be mad with us sometimes, but we will not be able to make out because our vision is material vision. Bhogya darshan, enjoying vision of the deity. You cannot understand. So similarly with the books, we would not be able to understand so much, which is also Vishaya Vigraha. So the devotees have to reveal those truths. So by hearing from devotees, we understand spiritual truth.
Reading with the devotees make difference?
Of course, reading with devotees make difference. And the main feature is, Prabhupada says this again and again, and this could be a subject of this. First of all, devotees should discuss whatever they've been hearing from devotees together. Bodhayanta parasparam, and that way churn the topics, and that way fix the topics in their heart more and more. But we have to hear from self-realized persons. Otherwise, if someone has not realized the truth, they would not understand so many subtleties about it. They cannot give it to us. Actually, kirtanam, one definition of kirtanam that is given by Prabhupada in chapter 19 of the Madhya Lila, kirtanam is just another word for shravanam in the true sense. Because whatever a devotee hears, that he speaks. So kirtanam is another word for shravanam. Whatever we hear from pure devotees who have realized the absolute truth, tattva-darshi, that is no small statement. He is seeing the absolute truth. Whatever you hear from such devotee, you speak that. That is called kirtan. Then that has great power to purify even ourselves and others. Although we may not have such purity, but we repeat only what we hear. And we try to understand it also. Like this, so many things. Okay, last thing, then we have to go because time is up. John Prabhu wants to say something.
Thank you for your class, Prabhu. You were just saying, right, repeating what the pure devotee says, even if you don't have full realization of it, you should still do it?
Yes, of course. This could be a big discussion. You have to qualify so many things. We don't want to repeat like parrots. Prabhupada has also condemned that. Just repeating like a parrot without any realization. Then you won't know what to speak at what times and so on. That becomes a problem. How to help others through the process of kirtan, or speaking the glories of Krishna. So we should try to, as Sutta Goswami says in the 3rd chapter, before he begins his dissertation, he said, I will speak to you all that I have heard and all that I've realized. 2 things, what I have heard and also what I have realized. So we have to realize the subject matter also. We should not feel satisfied with the idea that I don't have to realize anything, the books will do everything. That is a very mundane concept that is not taught in the books. Although sometimes that notion is given, but that is not a true notion. It is important for you to gain these realizations that are mentioned in the books through the process that is mentioned also in the books. So we shouldn't be lazy about doing the necessary work for self-realization. Then you will understand how to perform kirtan in such a way that it becomes a weapon cutting the material existence of the living entities. One of the weapons of Mahaprabhu, he came was the holy name of Krishna. The topics of Krishna, they're compared to swords that cut away the material existence. 1.1.15, it's compared to a sword that cuts away the material existence. But how can you wield this sword? How can you become a wielder of that sword? One who can use the sword properly. Then you have to have the realization of it, of the topic. Then you know how to use the kirtan in a way that it cuts the living entity's material existence. Otherwise, it's something like mouthing off. And everyone's got to start somewhere. So we have to practice speaking only about Krishna. But we should know the importance of realizing the topics as well. Like that. That is also important. We're going to stop there. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go to